Hello everyone, this is part 10 of What If Naruto formed a new team, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The following morning it was a cold, cloudless day. With it there was a hushed air of anxiety as Haruno Sakura climbed the stairs of a quiet apartment building at 9:15. She walked slowly with a silent guilt. She reviewed the script that she had been practicing in her head for nearly a day. What if they just s the door in my face? Do they hate me now? Gaara-kun, he was so mad. I guess I deserve it really. What kind of friend am I? Kiba-kun and Sasuke-kun just kept asking. I can't believe I caved in like that. Ever since the night of the Tanabata festival, Sakura had regretted every last one of her words. In her mind, she was sure she had never meant to say anything at all to her teammates, but her mouth had subconsciously run away with her one day during training and gotten her into serious trouble. Her feet, which had traveled the walkway many times, knew where to go on their own, letting her mind wander freely. I can't let them put pressure on me anymore. My friends are just too important to me. I don't want to lose them like this. After a minute or so, she looked up. There ahead of her gleamed the black number 4 on a door to her right. Sakura stopped and wrung her hands together nervously. The script that she had been continuously rehearsing suddenly evaporated from her head, leaving her helpless and shivery. What do I do now? She wondered, feeling something fluttering in her stomach. Wow. I've never been afraid to talk to them about anything before. What's wrong with me? She brought her hand up and let her knuckles rest soundlessly against the wood of the door. Why can't I do this? All it took was the memory of the red-haired boy scowling at her as she confessed her crime, the way he seemed to get farther and farther away from her as he stood perfectly still until he was a mere dot on the horizon. And what do Naruto-kun and Haku-kun think? She could imagine their expressions quite vividly as well, and for a moment she had even considered turning on her heel and running back home as fast as her legs could carry her. But that stubborn attitude Naruto had filled her head with after more than 1,000 speeches of morality and justice and becoming the Hokage made it impossible for her to turn away. Sakura, you've brought this upon yourself. She timidly knocked. It was a small, soft sound aimed at the center of the dark green door. Sakura waited there for a few seconds, hearing no commotion from within as she rocked back and forth on the balls of her feet. With a shuddering sigh, she knocked 3 more times, louder, but more tentatively. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end as she heard the sound of a chair being pushed back against the floor as a person stood. The footsteps that followed were inaudible, and she waited, thinking feverishly for something to say. What if it's Sakura-chan? In an instant the door was wide open and she saw Haku. She relaxed a fraction. Hi, Haku-kun. Her voice was quaking and she mentally scolded herself for being so cowardly. He looked as if he understood, if only a little, her reasons for coming. For half a second there was a pause and Sakura examined his facial features. He certainly looked more surprised than angry, that much was clear. He also looked as if she had broken his concentration and he seemed to be in a good mood. She was in luck. She smirked inwardly as she looked up at him. He's standing about a foot above me. When did he get so darn tall? Good morning, Sakura-chan. Oddly, he wasn't smiling, but he wasn't frowning either. Would you like to come in? Yes, thanks. She stepped inside and he closed the door. After that, the formalities began. Would you like something to drink? Milk, tea? Haku was walking ahead of her and she followed after him silently into the kitchen. No, I'm fine. He nodded, eyes closed, and went to the table and cleared it of the scrolls he had been comparing. Sakura stood awkwardly in the doorway, trying to recover scraps of her evaporated script. Haku gave her a measured look and a ghost of a smile appeared on his face. Please sit down, Sakura-chan. She nodded dumbly and took a seat at the table. Her tea felt tight and dusty. All of a sudden I feel like I'm going to cry. Why is he always so nice? His hair was down, she noticed. It fell just past his shoulder blades and she recalled how Naruto and Gaara would constantly dog him to see it, and how he always refused, saying that it was a symbol of how well he maintained himself. His hair's prettier than mine. Sakura re-examined the thought, maybe his hair is prettier than everyone's hair. She then wondered why she was having trouble focusing. I'm sorry that I barged in on you so early, Haku-kun. Sakura said quietly, not meeting his eyes. The ebony-haired boy stood over the sink, scrubbing dirty dishes that were neglected from the night before with a little help from his Kekkei Genkai. No, it's quite alright, Sakura-chan. You are always welcome here at any time. His kind words stung her just a little bit. Sakura's eyes dropped down into her lap and she gave up trying to salvage her script. Sakura-chan, is there something you would like to talk about? His voice was edged with worry and she could tell. Naruto-kun or Gaara-kun here, by any chance? Her nerve returned. I need to talk to you all about something. Haku tilted his head back in thought and then smiled genuinely. Well, I do believe Naruto-kun left early. He said there was something important he had to do. And Gaara-kun is still sleeping, I think. Oh, the part when he said, I think, had her partially nervous. Her heart rate escalated. If you'd like, I could go wake him for you, Haku offered, then added, although, I have been trying to wake him for 20 minutes now. No, that's all right, let him sleep. The dark-haired boy sighed and stacked a few of the cleaned dishes. It would do him some good. He needs to break that habit of his. He's been a bit slow lately. She was silent, staring anxiously at the wall across from her, on which a calendar had been hung with a picture of a dog carrying a kunai in its mouth, tail wagging wildly. Sakura-chan, he spoke again, his smile faded into a more serious look. Naruto and Gaara told me what happened. This time she made eye contact and her panicked look unnerved him. She was still unable to form words easily. It's all right, Sakura. I understand. His voice was warm and comforting. Everything that Gaara's had not been that night, there was nothing else you could have done. They're your teammates and I don't hold that against you. But I shouldn't have done it in the first place. She answered, angry at herself. Haku-kun, you and Naruto and Gaara. You're my friends. I can't live knowing that I'll screw up and end our friendship. He ceased drying the dishes and turned to face her fully. You've already been forgiven, Sakura-chan, don't punish yourself. Besides, I'm sure that Sasuke and Kiba are your friends now as well, aren't they? Well, I guess so. Then you must have faith that we will always be friends, no matter the obstacle, Haku went on, then smiled again. You worry too much. What's done is done and now we must move forward. It isn't the end of the world. It's just. She sighed and then stood up, a small smile finding her lips. Well, you're right, Haku-kun. This definitely isn't the end of the world. He chuckled good-naturedly in response, trying to lessen the tension. I'm sorry for everything. I messed up and I promise it won't happen again. Sakura said, her voice stronger. I'll come back later if that's all right. Naruto-kun and Gaara-kun deserve an apology too. I'll be glad to have you back. He answered and she smiled in relief. Sakura left, feeling better walking out than she had walking in. Still, somewhere in her gut she knew things were going to change between them. Whether for better or worse it was still unclear. Naruto walked down the sidewalk with his arms folded behind his head, deep in thought. The day before had left Gaara, Haku and himself in a right state after getting the news about Sakura's slip-up. However, at the present time his mind was set on something else, something Gaara had said. You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know anything about that. You can't even see it for yourself, not even when Hinata looks at you, you see nothing. You are a blind fool. Naruto frowned, not sure if Gaara had seriously meant anything he had said. He was upset. He was rambling. But what if some of the stuff he had said was true? Could Hinata-chan maybe? Naruto shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. No, I can't just jump to conclusions. Maybe I'm just overthinking this. He then smiled to himself, but what if she? Again he shook his head fiercely and other pedestrians gave him odd looks. I'll just go ask her myself, Naruto said and nodded as he walked, then, problem solved. I'm sure Hinata-chan can set things straight if I go see her. The blonde-haired boy marched on, more confident, and certainly more oblivious of what he was about to do. Upon his arrival to the Hyuga compound, Naruto was unable to keep his mind off of the thought. Why would she like someone like me? Gaara-kun's crazy. Well, that had always been apparent. Rather than jumping the wall as he normally did, Naruto strolled leisurely right in through the front gate. The standing guards merely ignored him, knowing that if they refused him entry he'd still find a way in anyway, as he always had. He was a familiar face at the estate. The lawn was ridiculously well kept, with trees and hedges trimmed to perfection. Gardens lined the outside of the mansion with blooms of every color imaginable. It was hard to believe, Naruto felt, that such a cheerful landscape could be a home for one of the crankiest clans in Konoha. Darting about were a few servants carrying baskets and other items with heads bowed submissively as they passed a main branch member. These people are just so friggin' stuck up all the time. I can't believe Hinata-chan's related to them. There it was again. That pesky little notion about Hinata. Naruto himself could scarcely imagine why he couldn't stop thinking about her after hearing Gaara's tirade. He was just mad, maybe he was making stuff up. It felt weird that he was compelled to deny it, as if it would be a bad thing if she possibly did like him. Well, maybe it wouldn't be bad, he smiled to himself again, Hinata-chan, she's. He then recalled how her father, Hiashi, seemed stilted, if not deeply bothered by his presence whenever they met. Her dad would probably cane me if he found out. His jumbled thoughts were interrupted by a familiar face. Naruto stopped and looked far across to the opposite side of the yard to see a young shinobi exiting one of the buildings. It had been a while since he had seen Neji, he noted. Wow, he doesn't look as pissed as he normally does right about now. Indeed, the young Hyuga seemed less moody than usual, though his face betrayed no visible trace of emotion. He walked ghost-like in the morning light across the lawn. Sometimes I even forget he lives here. It then occurred to Naruto that he might be leaving to join his team for a day of training, maybe I should take a leaf out of his book. Before Naruto took his gaze off of Hinata's older cousin he noticed Neji stop abruptly, and that once relaxed air that he emanated seemed to cess instantly. A few feet away from him stood an older man, perhaps a shinobi, Naruto assumed. At first glance he appeared to be extremely hostile towards the younger Hyuga. Neji was aware of it as well. It was silent for a long while and when the elder Hyuga spoke Naruto was too far away to hear it. A fierce, white glare settled on Neji. Why should you be free? How can you matter so much? There was a flicker of sympathy in Neji's eyes for a moment, real humanity. It vanished instantly as the elder Hyuga seemed to radiate some terrible intent which Naruto was able to sense. What was that? Before Naruto could make out any more words or an exchange of sorts they were at each other, snarling like dogs. The blonde watched in bafflement as the elder Hyuga leapt at Neji, palms flat, a wild thing of rage. Neji didn't seem genuinely angry as he prepared to defend himself, but he certainly wasn't pleased with the development. Naruto watched, floored for the first few seconds as they at each other with bursts of chakra, fast and savage. Apparently he was the only current witness. A moment later it became more aggressive, turned into full S of yukin, blue and painful. The intent was then overwhelming and Naruto couldn't understand how Neji was able to stand his ground after feeling it. What should I? The blonde stood still and watched as Neji took a solid blow in the side, which he returned to his opponent, cringing. The elder Hyuga was then hissing, a thing possessed, wanting to flay Neji, crush him, make him feel and broken and stepped on and screaming and. It was over. Neji leapt back, shaking. His foe was on the ground, sobbing, clawing at his forehead. That was when Naruto had noticed Hiashi had appeared out of nowhere. He looked grim and ended his tea of the insubordinate branch member nearly as quickly as it had begun. Neji's opponent lay there pathetically at the clan leader's feet, shoulders shaking and tearful. Neji knew. He had always known. This humility, this cage, it could have been his fate. Hiashi was silent, still furious that his nephew had been attacked. Neji stared down at the crumpled mess of a human being that wanted to end him, or himself. There was no seal on his forehead, but still, Neji suffered the pains of the branch family. They made sure they shared their suffering with him. Their cage was his own and he had always known what it felt like. Neji's stare turned to Hiashi, icy and resentful. Naruto watched from afar, not comprehending what he had seen at all. The anger he had felt when he had been defending himself was redirected at Hiashi, the person he thought was responsible for this pain. The one who inflicted it. The one who embraced it. His pain and the others as well. Hiashi's gaze rested briefly on his nephew. He spoke in a low voice, "Run along now, Neji. Neji, who had the present sense to not act on anger unlike his unfortunate relative, held his tongue and continued walking, stiff-backed and visibly reproachful. What he had seen he had never wanted to see again. Naruto watched as Neji left swiftly through the front gate, ignoring the staring sentries, and proceeded to find his team with, yet again, a ruined mood. Shocked and slightly disturbed by what he had witnessed, Naruto continued on quietly, wanting to find solace in the one person he knew who could always give it to him. Hinata's favorite garden was on the west side of the compound. It was a discreet place that was often overlooked, full of young sapling trees and lilies, white, pink, and orange everywhere one looked. Naruto knew he would find her there. She sat humming to herself beside a koi pond, scattering feed on the surface of the water and watching as the orange and white fish flapped about eating to their heart's content. The blonde stepped clumsily on a twig and alerted her to his presence. The white-eyed girl turned to him and put down the small bucket she had been holding. "Oh, Naruto-kun. It's so nice to see you." Hinata quickly got to her feet and dusted her pants off. Her bright smile made him feel a bit livelier. "Hey Hinata-chan." He tried to give her a foxy grin, but it seemed pained. "I hope you don't mind that I stopped by." She looked slightly alarmed and raised her hands up. No. I like it when you come to visit." He nodded but his smile faded. It was his lack of a smile that had her worried. "Naruto-kun, are you feeling alright?" "I'm not really sure." Hinata decided to cover the basics of formality first. "I see. Have you had anything to eat yet? It is still quite early." "Right on time," his stomach answered her in a low growl. He frowned to himself, wondering where her precognitive powers had come from. When the noise subsided, they laughed together heartily. Naruto, as usual, was a bit louder. "Well, I guess if you have any leftovers lying around, I'd really appreciate it." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. She nodded shyly. "Yes, it is about time for breakfast, I think. Let's go inside. I'd be glad if you joined me." She stepped up on the porch, already barefoot, upon which he hastily removed his shoes. He followed her inside and down a short corridor. "Your dad, he won't get mad if I hang around for a bit?" Hinata gave him a puzzled look. "No, I don't think he will, Naruto-kun." He nodded as she opened a sliding door and they ventured into the dining room. There was a long, low table in the center of the room with a traditional tatami mat floor. A window was left wide open for fresh air. Hinata took a seat next to the only girl at the table, and motioned for Naruto to sit at the free place beside her. The blonde plopped down next to her ungracefully and scratched his head. He smiled at the younger girl. The girl who was already present gave him an incredulous look before going back to her tea. A moment later a servant scurried in, head lowered, with a tray of dishes. He quickly laid them out in front of the girls, bowed, and then left. Naruto blinked at how fast he had come and gone. Hinata smiled. "What good timing. Do help yourself, Naruto-kun." "Sure." Naruto reached over to a plate, secured himself a pair of chopsticks, and after a grateful, "Itadakimasu," he was off. The younger girl gave Hinata an odd look, which Hinata interpreted as confusion. "Oh yes, Naruto-kun, this is my sister, Hanabi." She turned to Hanabi. "Hanabi, this is my good friend Naruto." Huh. She didn't seem very interested. Hinata sighed, expecting such a reaction. Naruto, after swallowing, grinned at Hanabi. "It's nice to meet you." Hanabi sniffed at him and then turned to Hinata. "Remember Oni-san, you will be training with father later on. You shouldn't get yourself distracted." Hinata's cheeks became beet red remarkably quick. Naruto didn't like Hanabi's attitude. "I'm not a distraction. Sheesh. Can't I guy hang out with his friends once in a while?" Hanabi smirked, wondering how such a loudmouth had befriended her quiet, older sister. Hinata proceeded to serve herself something to eat, then asked, Naruto-kun, what brings you here this early?" Naturally, he had wanted to blurt out the first thing on his mind. "Do you happen to secretly adore me?" According to Gaara this may be true, and I just wanted to get my facts straight. Naruto busied his mouth with some egg to buy himself a moment of thought. With Hanabi around it was much more difficult to touch on the already difficult subject. What am I supposed to say to her anyway? For once he didn't know. He swallowed and then replied carefully, "I just wanted to come over and train with you." "Yeah, you're an awesome sparring partner, Hinata-chan." It took him a moment to believe his own bluff. Hanabi raised an eyebrow as she sipped her tea, wondering what all his stalling was about. Hinata, for a moment, looked like she had been expecting a different answer. She was quiet as she thought on it, and then nodded, honored. I'm glad that you think so, Naruto-kun, but, wouldn't you prefer to train with Haku-kun or Gaara-kun? I train with them all the time. They're pushovers. He smiled at her, trying to be convincing. You're different. I like training with you, Hinata-chan, really. In his head, he was upset with his evasion of his primary subject. Wow. I really didn't think it'd be this hard to talk about. Her face was bright red again and her sister rolled her eyes. Well then, I suppose it would be all right. A small smile crept up onto her face. I like tea training with you too, Naruto-kun. After finishing breakfast and retrieving their shoes, Hinata led the way to an empty courtyard behind the main house. All the while, Naruto searched for any signs or actions given off by Hinata that may prove Gaara's theory true. Strangely, he saw nothing unusual, just the same old, soft-spoken Hinata. It was clear that she had been befuddled by his random appearance that morning. She had still seemed happy to see him, which was normal for her. Naruto, unfortunately, had no talent picking out the subtle hints like his red-haired friend had. So much of the girl's blushing and stuttering went overlooked, which was also normal. Shall we begin with taijutsu first? Hinata asked, noticing him stretching off on the side of the yard. You bet. She giggled at his perky answer and then slipped into a perfect gentle fist stance. Nearby, a lark called out into the cool morning air. Naruto did his best to recall the last time he had fought her. She whacked the crap out of me. Better try to dodge more this time. He gave no warning when he ran at her. Not that it mattered, she was ready, and he saw the veins surrounding her eyes appear as he leapt, beginning with a heel kick that he often used to off-balance Gaara. She countered with a small cry, pushing him back with a flat-palmed hand. He couldn't restrain his laugh at her utterly adorable counterstrike, but managed to evade another palm that came swiping for his head. Suddenly he had forgotten why he had come in the first place and began to believe his own bluff. After a tangle of shuffling feet and a number of resounding "Oh Naruto. Your head. Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Naruto had realized just how grateful he was that she wasn't using real Ryuken blows against him. With a strained leap, he landed behind her and she evaded his sweep kick thanks to her Byakugan. Then the rounds of punching and dodging began again. 10 minutes turned into 20, 20 became a half hour, and after a long while of laughing and dodging, Naruto finally thought to ask, "Say Hinata-chan, why aren't you with your team right now?" She paused in their scuffle and admitted sheepishly, "Today is my team's day off." Naruto felt his brain turn mushy. What? But, if today was your break and I've been making you. No, it's alright, she assured him. I train on my days off as it is, Naruto-kun, sometimes with my father, but, you are much more fun. The blonde still felt guilty. I'm sorry Hinata-chan, if I had known you were resting I wouldn't have. She shook her head again, please. It is quite all right. He nodded, grateful that she was so easygoing, and then an idea popped into his head from a completely unrelated topic. Didn't Ero-sensei make me swear not to tell Haku-kun or Gaara-kun about the Rasengan? He smirked to himself. He never said anything about Hinata-chan though. It was truly the perfect opportunity. The Rasengan, which he had nearly mastered fully, was something he desperately wanted to get off his sea. Every time he was near his teammates, his mouth burned to talk about it. But Ero-sennin made me swear. Here was Hinata. She was shy, innocent and certainly not the type of person to spread gossip. I can totally trust Hinata-chan. Hey Hinata-chan, he had regained his foxy grin and her heart fluttered at the sight of it. How about I show you this super cool new jutsu I've been working on? Hinata gave him an odd look. A new jutsu. Instantly her mind went to Sato and his coincidental revealing of the new jutsu he had pestered his uncle to teach him. She knew better though. Naruto wasn't exactly on the best of terms with either Sato or his uncle, so he was probably unaware of it at the time. The blonde nodded sagely. Yeah, if you promise not to tell anyone, I can show it to you. She nodded fervently, of course. He grinned at her predictable cooperation before her curiosity got the better of her. So what sort of jutsu is it? It's this move called the Rasengan. He shouted, feeling the weight lift off of his shoulders like magic. My sensei taught it to me, but he won't let me tell Haku-kun or Gaara-kun about it. I see, she murmured, it sounds so exciting, can you teach me, maybe? He scratched his head, I don't know, it uses a lot of chakra. How about I just show you? Hinata stood a short distance away from him and observed as he formed a spiraling sphere of chakra in his right hand. Intrigued by such a strange technique, she decided to view it with her Byakugan as well and noticed something curious. Naruto-kun is right. He is using a large amount of chakra. She frowned to herself, concerned, where is all that chakra coming from? She noticed the small specks of red chakra filtering through his circulatory system, where they channeled together through his arm and down into his hand, chakra spinning wildly in many directions. He can spin his chakra so quickly. Naruto smirked to himself, glad he had caught her attention. Good, now, what's around here that no one is going to miss? She won't see how strong this is just by looking at it. Thinking quickly once he had it fully formed, he stole a peek around the yard and spotted a beaten-looking log on its side a few paces behind him. Okay, Hinata-chan. Check this out. He turned around and ran at his defenseless target, grinning maniacally. Hinata watched in silent astonishment as he barreled into the log, thrusting his hand into it, and the blue sphere of chakra easily blew the tree into thousands of pathetic splinters. Oh my. Dust rose up into the air in a thin cloud as he returned to his sparring partner, smirking broadly. Pretty neat, huh? Even he was impressed with himself. That was the first time I had it right actually. I've never seen anything like it before, she said quietly, wondering when he had become so strong. Ero-sensei told me that the fourth Hokage used that move a lot. Naruto brushed his hands off casually. Just another reason I know I'll be Hokage someday. Her awe was tangible as she stood gawking. I know you will, but you don't need some powerful jutsu to prove that to me, Naruto-kun. Naruto gave her an appreciative look and took a moment to take in her encouraging words. Hinata was quiet after that, and the blonde-haired boy pondered that maybe he had intimidated her just a bit too much. Yeah well, I've got other great jutsu too. His eyes lit up with an idea. I know this one I can definitely teach you. If you like. Really? Her face brightened hopefully. Of course. I think I know one you'd like. Naruto smirked to himself and quickly formed seals, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Beside him stood an exact replica of himself. She herself could tell it was no ordinary clone. Naruto watched warily as she activated the Byakugan again, to observe his creation. The clone gave her a goofy grin and her cheeks tinted a pale pink. The blonde boy glared at the clone, hissing threateningly under his breath. No fooling around, got it? Naruto's replication only chuckled. You think that I might be able to do this? She inquired softly, less confident after witnessing the Rasengan. He gave her a disapproving look. What? Of course. It's pretty simple actually, and making one or two clones doesn't take a lot of chakra. As an afterthought, though I can make hundreds of them. So long as you're careful and stay within your limits you can definitely use this technique. Naruto informed her. Hinata brightened again. You really think so? Yeah. Believe it. Naruto nodded fiercely. Your chakra control is fine so it should be a piece of cake for you. He showed her the seal required for the jutsu. Give it a try. She nodded slowly and formed the seal he had showed her. Her voice was faint. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto knew his faith would be well invested in her. On her first try, Hinata had formed a shadow clone of herself. It stood nearby quietly, blushing. His grin was wide. See? What did I tell you? She grinned back, her cheeks tinted. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I promise I'll work very hard to make this jutsu worthwhile. I know you will, but for now, he smirked, let's keep this a secret between you and me. Gaara-kun and Haku-kun don't know that jutsu either. She nodded and then let her clone dissolve. Hinata sighed, tired out from their training. Maybe we should take a short break. Naruto, still enormously proud of her, stretched his arms over his head. That sounds like a good idea. The two of them went off to the side of the courtyard and seated themselves on the back porch of the main house. Naruto leaned against a support beam and relaxed, his head making a soft thud with the impact. Hinata timidly removed her jacket, finding herself a bit overheated. Naruto's thoughts began to wander again. Maybe Hinata-chan can explain what was going on when I first got here. Hinata-chan, she looked up when he spoke. When I came here this morning I saw your cousin. Neji-Nisan. Yeah, he nodded. Something happened though. Some guy just jumped him, maybe even wanted to K him, it felt like. They were fighting like crazy and then, your dad showed up and stopped it. Her eyes lowered, clearly saddened. I hoped you would never have to see something like that. What was it about anyway? Do you remember the day you and Gara-kun and Haku-kun helped me prevent Neji-Nisan from getting the caged bird seal? She asked, not delighting in the memory. He frowned. Sure I do. Neji-Nisan is still considered by most of my clan to be part of the branch family, as his father was, Hinata explained, voice shaking. My father made a plea to the elders so that he would not be given the seal. Well. She sighed. It was my plea really. My father he wanted so badly for me to be strong, stronger than Neji-Nisan. But you are strong, Hinata-chan. Naruto was indignant. How can you say you're not? My father wanted me to succeed him as the clan head, but I was never talented enough, not like Neji-Nisan is, she said quietly, almost ashamed. Without the caged bird seal, Neji-Nisan is a rival candidate for being clan heir, my rival. Naruto folded his arms, growling, so your dad says he's stronger than you. But he is, Hinata admitted, dropping her gaze. Neji-Nisan is very skilled and unlike the other members of the branch family, he is free. Because of that many of them are bitter. I get it. He nodded. So that guy who attacked him, he was angry. Yes, she replied solemnly. Some are happy for him though. They feel that he may be able to break the cycle of the caged bird seal and heal our clan. She paused in thought. That is what I want. That is my goal as well. I feel that it is a tradition that should be thrown away. Me too. Naruto agreed. It's just so stupid, how they keep a clan separated like that. But my father, her voice trembled, he is ashamed of me. I am not strong like Neji-Nisan is. I am weak and afraid and an embarrassment to my clan. Her white eyes grew teary, and he knew that once Neji-Nisan did not receive the caged bird seal, that IW would lose any chance of becoming the leader of my clan. Naruto looked horrified as tears slipped silently down her cheeks, and her head was bowed in total disgrace after she finished speaking. His expression quickly turned to one of anger. No. He stood, shaking his head aggressively. You can't believe that load of crap. It's all a lie and you know it. Hinata looked up at him questioningly, wiping the drops from her face. It's not true. You aren't weak and afraid, Naruto protested. You're strong. I mean, you can beat the S out of me if you wanted to. She giggled, still wiping her cheeks, and you're brave. Believe it, when we helped Neji, it was all your idea to do it. You're the reason your cousin is free and that makes all the difference. You're not an embarrassment at all. You're someone that your clan to be proud of. He nodded in finality and added, yeah. So, I think that you should be the leader of your clan, not Neji. Because you don't think with your fists, you use your heart and that's why you're a shinobi. A strong one. Her eyes were teary again. Naruto. A small smile appeared on her face. Thank you, but I'm afraid that my father just doesn't see that yet. Naruto grinned. So what? You can make him see it if you just do your best. Then he'll see picking Neji over you is a big mistake. You think I can do it? Of course. Just don't worry. The blonde boy's eyes were intense. I'll help you. I promise. When Tenten had received 2 unknown weapon scrolls from Haku, she had been itching to test them out. Later on that day, before attending the festival, she had decided to investigate what she had been given. The first scroll, upon inspection, had been a chain scythe. Not much of a challenge, after all, she already owned one and could wield it with expertise. However, much to her astonishment, he had given her another weapon that never in her life had she even imagined wielding. It was labeled as a discontinued leaf arsenal weapon and had probably not been used in ages. She had never seen one before, but she knew from past research exactly what it was. A Zanbato. Tenten suspected it had been taken from the arsenal without permission because even she was aware it was illegal for leaf shinobi of trainee level to wield such a weapon. She wasn't about to rat Haku out for taking it, knowing it could get them both into trouble. Horse-s swords like these she knew were outlawed for many reasons. One reason being that they often endangered the user with their massive recoil and lack of maneuverability, making them clumsy in battle. A second reason being that attacking an enemy and successfully landing a blow was nearly always a guaranteed K. What goes on in his head that makes him think I can actually use this? She pondered, fearing where the notion came from. She had to admit she loved it. The blade itself was nearly as tall as she, not counting the length of the leather-bound hilt. It was new, or as far as Tenten could tell, unused. Perfectly balanced and unmarked, the blade shined in the morning sun and the tip curved upward at its end, reminiscent of the claw of some terrible predator. It was art, pure and simple, and her most treasured sword so far. The primary issue, however, was rather simple. Ugh! Tenten tugged furiously at the hilt of the sword. It didn't budge the slightest. Why do they always have to make them so huge? She collapsed beside it, panting heavily. Tenten had arrived at her training field first in order to try out her new favorite weapon. Unfortunately, she found herself completely incapable of lifting it. It was ridiculous that a shinobi could be expected to lift one in the first place, let alone fight with something as preposterously heavy. I'm not giving up yet. Rising to her feet again, Tenten took hold of the sword, stubborn determination written all over her face. Focusing her chakra into her arms, she heaved with a new, chakra-assisted strength. Her arms shook as the blade snuck a few inches from the ground, and a few more, until she held it nearly to waist height. Her mouth was set in a firm line and she glared at her quaking, struggling limbs. Just lifting it was not chakra economical. Mastering this weapon was going to take a very long time. I've never realized how physically weak I am. Tenten marveled, disgusted with her lack of strength. There's no way I can use this. I might as well hand it over to. Hello, Tenten. Startled, she lost control of her chakra, and once again bound by gravity the sword plummeted an agonizing 3 feet down, the dull side landing squarely on Lee's foot. He was still happy to see her, and Tenten watched guiltily as his eyes began to water from the crushing agony that was her sword. Frantic, Tenten used her full weight to pull back on the blasted weapon and managed to free Lee's wounded appendage. Howling, his foot came up, cradled like a wounded babe, and he hopped around in a small circle to shake off the pain. He felt better in seconds. Lee faced her, intrigued. Tenten. My merciful teammate, she gave him an apologetic look. What do you have there? She furrowed her brow as she looked to her frustrating yet delightful new addition to her arsenal. This is it, Lee. This right here, she patted the smooth face of the steel blade, is my limit. Oh, I'm really sorry about your foot, Lee. This thing is stupidly heavy. It's not broken, is it? I am perfectly fine. He grinned at her, then turned his attention to the Zanbato. My. What a fantastic weapon, Tenten. Did Haku-kun give that to you? Tenten sighed in exasperation. He sure did. Lee reached out and took the hilt of the sword from her inquisitively, to which she made no move to object. To her immense dissatisfaction, he lifted the damn thing with relative ease. So you are having difficulty wielding this sword? Lee asked, wearing a thoughtful expression. She nodded, completely miffed. It's no good. I've got muscles all right, but I'm not Guy-sensei. With a wail, she added, finally, when I get my hands on something truly amazing I can't even lift it. He gave her a quizzical look. But you were holding it up before, if I am not mistaken. No, Lee. That was pure chakra and chakra alone doing that, and even then I was about to lose my grip. Tenten's frustration was evident. Sure, I can swing that thing around for a while, but I'll deplete my chakra nearly 3 times as fast at any given rate. Nodding, he took her problems into consideration, and then declared, then we must train your body to withstand such strain. With hard work and perseverance, I can help you build up your muscles until you can lift things many times heavier than this. Eyes wide, Tenten accepted the generous offer. That would be great, Lee. She glanced down at the Zanbato. When should we get started? There is no better time than the present. Lee announced jubilantly and lowered the sword. Here, Tenten, try to lift it again. She reached out and took the hilt from him. She tugged with a force all the way from the tips of her toes and had no success. Picking apart the problem in his head, Lee took hold of the hilt as well, assisting her. Incredibly, it was up. She frowned, disliking the gap in their abilities. You said you could lift it with your chakra, yes? Lee asked, forming ideas. I think we should begin with that. With a huff, Tenten forced more chakra into her arms, and felt some strain lessen from that and Lee's help. He nodded, smiling at the small progress. Good. Very good. Now we shall have a few warm-up swings, to accustom your arms to the stress. Lee was surprisingly helpful. Yeah, I get where you're going with this, Tenten answered, bending her arms as Lee hadn't pulled back on the blade. When did you become so knowledgeable about this sort of stuff, Lee? When training in taijutsu, it is very important to be mindful of the limitations of one's body, Lee quoted Guy. Physical strain like this, I believe, falls under the same category. Tenten nodded, swinging the blade, and hoping that the grip on the hilt wouldn't fail and send the blade crashing back down to the ground again. It lasted for over 10 minutes, Lee explaining the functions of the warm-up, and Tenten feeling like her arms were on fire. After a short while, Lee paused in their practice, leaving Tenten's chakra-high arms quivering. Now I feel you should slowly reduce the amount of chakra in your arms, so your muscles will, he tried to put it as mildly as he could, adapt. Weaning yourself off of the use of chakra gradually should help, I think. Adapt. Tenten huffed, amused. You mean let them get torn to pieces so they grow bigger? Yes. She sighed. Well, whatever works. Almost fearfully, Tenten focused on how much chakra she had built up, and with a reasonable hesitation, lessened it a tiny margin. The blade drooped and she felt her brain splash down into her stomach. Lee looked expectant. Her arms were shaking more violently, as they struggled to deal with the weight. Cringing, Tenten took a breath. Okay Lee, I'm good now. He nodded, not wanting to rush her. Arms bent, the blade was pulled back, and Tenten felt the fire in her arms escalate. They swung the blade forward together, but Lee's strength alone was no longer enough to compensate her reduction of chakra. She felt something in her forearms pop and she yelped in response. Lee, I think that did it. That is enough for now. He helped her lower the sword. We'll give you a few minutes to rest and then we can begin training you in taijutsu. Tenten gave him a puzzled look. How will that help me lift this thing? It's like trying to lift a cow. Ah, but wielding a sword uses not just the strength of your upper body, does it? Guy's protege pointed out, you must be able to block and move while you fight, and taijutsu is the perfect conditioning for that. Tenten smiled, rubbing her arms at the idea. Lee, I'm really impressed. I think I may be able to use that thing after all. Your youthful spirit will make sure of it. Lee laughed jovially. I know you will be the finest of all weapons specialists in the fire country, Tenten. I have no doubts. She chuckled in response, still rubbing her agonized arms. From the side of the field, Neji then came into view and was certainly not in the highest of spirits. Lee, however, was in the exact opposite state. Neji, my eternal rival. Today will be the day I shall defeat you. Lee announced, predictably. Without a word, Neji stalked past him and up to Tenten. Neither Lee or Tenten mentioned it, but the Hyuga prodigy looked like he had already been training for a while then, or rather, like he had been in some sort of fight. His arms were bruised and his face was contorted in something worse than his normal level of anger. And with no change in inflection, Tenten, are you ready? Oh, I forgot. She realized after a moment, I really should be training with Neji now. Maybe without this oversized butcher's knife of mine. She turned to Lee, who gave her an understanding look. Tenten frowned at that look. It was puzzling how they so easily surrendered to Neji's whim whenever it was expressed. He tended to have that effect on people. Actually Neji, I'm training with Lee today. Lee gave her an alarmed look, fearing they may incur the prodigy's wrath with such an idea. He's helping me out with this thing. She gestured to the Zanbato beside her. I'll train with you in a little while if you like. He was still processing the sentence that included training and Lee in it. Oh no, she wounded his precious pride. Losing interest, if there was any, he turned without saying anything and ventured to the side of the field for some hardcore meditation. Tenten gulped, feeling that this foul mood they had witnessed was not by any means produced by them. Lee still appeared flabbergasted that she had the guts to turn her sparring partner down for a second time, and without much protest from him either. Shaking off the awkwardness, Tenten faced Lee again. Well, come on, I want to get started. Right on schedule, Guy arrived in a spectacular display of swirling leaves and blossoms, distracting Lee, who immediately ran to him for the morning rant. Guy-sensei, Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee. With a sigh, Tenten went over to them, wondering how she coped. Hello my youthful students. Lately he had been favoring Tenten and Lee after the dance at the festival. I see that you two are working together this morning. Yes, Guy-sensei. Lee was radiant. Splendid. Guy seemed to overlook the giant sword Tenten had summoned after seeing Neji quietly meditating a long ways off. Please, return to your hard work and cooperation. Guy grinned down at him, earning a salute from Lee in response. Tenten nodded, trying to cling to whatever normalcy was left over. Deep breaths and full concentration were not softening Neji's mood in the least. He didn't very much care that Tenten had arranged other plans, he would have only used her as an outlet for his frustrations, as usual. Seeing a distant cousin attack him out of pure envy, and then to see him writhe on the ground helplessly at the mercy of the caged bird seal was not something he delighted in. He had watched its effects for too long, even with his own father before his death, and for an instant of blind rage, he may have even considered challenging Hiashi, but to what end? He had reopened the tenketsu that his foolish relative had sealed, but the marks remained. Neji felt more humility from what he witnessed rather than how he was attacked. Neji, my prodigy, I see that you have decided not to train with your youthful teammates this morning. Guy had quietly snuck up beside him, something he had noticed much earlier. Neji kept his eyes closed and said nothing in reply. Taking a stretch, Guy pressed the subject further. Those injuries, I do not believe they were inflicted by either Lee or Tenten. Which was relatively obvious. I'd prefer not to discuss the matters of my clan. Neji pointed out dryly, ending the conversation. Hell would freeze over before he confided in Guy. With a nod, Guy left the Hyuga prodigy to meditate, and went ahead to investigate how Tenten had acquired such a massive Zanbato. 1 week later. I will not debate this with you any longer. You have heard my conditions. Kurenai was fed up with her most argumentative student. I have spoken to your uncle and he has been reprimanded by Hokage-sama himself for teaching you such a technique. But I'm telling you, sensei, I can use the Chidori. Sato was still protesting, even after days of disagreement. That is precisely why you have been forbidden from performing it, she pointed out, it will get you K. You have no means of defending yourself from a counterattack, not like your uncle. But I can still subdue my enemies. I can show you. No, whatever you feel may make your use of the Chidori effective is not worth the risk. Kurenai gave him a steady glare. You are only a genin, Sato, and your skill is questionable. As your instructor I must ensure your safety. You act just like Kakashi. Dance around the truth of it, say it's too dangerous, but you don't acknowledge anything that I can do. Sato snarled, all you really mean is that I'm stupid. That I can't protect myself. I don't have anyone who believes in me, and now I think I don't need anyone who does. I don't care what you have to say, sensei. I can do this on my own. You're just like the rest of them. Abruptly, before she could retort, the silver-haired boy stormed out of the new training area that they had been using. Hinata watched him leave, hands folded, worry weaving its way into her delicate features. She was unsure of what to think. Both Sato and Kurenai had brought up great points, but in terms of safety and ability, Kurenai had the upper hand. Hinata could only hope that Sato would not do anything rash before the arrival of the Chunin exam. Shino, it was clear, agreed fully with Kurenai. He stood next to Hinata, hands hidden in his pockets. It is for his own good, Kurenai said finally, to her remaining students, I'm sure I can trust you two to prevent him from endangering himself. They nodded silently. Back in town, Sato was fuming. He had a difficult time recovering from the endless argument he had with his Junin instructor. Even his own teammates seemed uncertain of him using the Chidori after seeing it themselves. The young Hitaki made his way hastily down a busy street, frowning and thinking the situation over. What do they know anyway? They're not really concerned about my safety. They're just pissed off some juvenile delinquent like me is raising the bar for the other genin around here. Always selling me short. He stopped outside of a bakery and peeked in through the window thoughtfully. Maybe I can hang out here for a while. Sato strolled inside, running into the back end of a long line. Whoa, it's busy in here today. He took a seat as people scurried around, picking out pastries and bread, shouting orders, arguing who was first in line, things he was used to hearing. Patiently, Sato waited for the customers to leave one by one, and snapped a picture of the last to exit, who happened to be a balding, obese man who had purchased a fritter. Sato smirked to himself, amused. Did you come out for lunch? He looked across the now empty shop to see Tama leaning on the counter next to the register. She gave him a welcoming smile and he grinned back, feeling less upset. Nah, I'm not hungry. Hey, guess whose 15th birthday is in? Sato took a moment to think. 2 months and 6 days. Tama sighed, smiling. Mine. Maybe. He pulled up a chair to the counter and sat down cross-legged, grinning. I think you're right, clever girl. His odd behavior did not catch her unaware and she rested her chin on her hand, considering the false expression on his face. You seem upset about something. Is everything all right? The grin he had conjured crumbled away. No, nothing's all right anymore, he admitted. I got my team pissed off at me again. What happened this time? She asked, curious, turning around and rearranging the bread on the shelves behind her as she listened. See, I finally got my cyclopic uncle to teach me the Chidori, right? Tama giggled. Right. Then I show my teammates because I think that they might give me just a bit more respect, right? She nodded. Right. Then Kurenai sensei just flips out and tells the Hokage. Now I'm forbidden from using it ever. He hollered, standing up and waving his arms about. After a moment of thought, Tama answered, I understand. That wasn't very fair of them to do after all of your hard work. He smirked at her favorable response. However, I think for now you should be patient and trust their judgment, so you don't get into any more trouble, alright? But it's so stupid. No one has faith in me. They all think I'm just some kid with a bunch of tricks, but I'm. Shush. Keep it down, you'll scare away my customers, she admonished lightly. You've got to calm down. You are a great shinobi, don't let them convince you otherwise. If it were up to me, I'd let you use the Chidori whenever you felt it necessary. But I think just because they're looking out for you doesn't mean that they don't trust you. I know you believe in me, but that's kind of your job, isn't it? Sato chuckled, feeling buttered up by her confidence. Tama shrugged. Yes, I suppose it is my job, she then added, although, this is my job too. She patted the counter smirking. It's hard to believe I earn more money in a day's work than a genin does. He sighed. Not that hard to believe, actually. Her dark eyes lit up with an idea. Oh. I just remembered. Could you do me a favor and find Lee for me? Sato grinned. What? You want to ask him on a date or something? No, eh? Tama snapped. I'm kind of not allowed to do that. He laughed playfully. I bet you would if you could, right? She wore a small smile. Maybe I would. Now will you quit it? I need you to find him and tell him to come out here in his free time. Sato's voice became slightly defensive. Why? Unlike you, he helps out around the shop and is polite and courteous. Tama explained, folding her arms. All of his help has earned him a free muffin. So can you tell him to stop by and pick it up? He relaxed a margin. Oh, sure. I thought you had a thing for him or something. Will you knock it off? She warned. You have no reason to mistrust me. Hey, it's okay. Lee's a cool guy. Sato chuckled. I'll go find him for you then. I'm not busy. With a sigh she nodded, glad that she had his cooperation. Thank you. Sato exited the bakery with a new spring in his step. Visiting Tama always cheered him up. Although he was aware that his idiot uncle was the reason for his engagement to her, it had not bothered him when he was young. Sure, she was nearly 3 years older than he was and quite a handful, but she was one of his closest lifelong friends. There were times he wondered if it was wrong that he didn't want to marry her, like he would be breaking some sort of contract that was signed for him. After all, their relationship was forged when they were infants. He prized her friendship and support, but the older he got, the more doubts he began to have. She also seemed aware that he was reluctant of the entire marriage idea. But they never complained, because good friends shouldn't fret over sharing a life together, she had once said. Still, he remembered trying to interest her in others on a few occasions, hoping she would choose a different path. It never worked. Then again, the dates he had set up for her hadn't gone very well and she let him know it too. So whether they liked it or not, they were stuck together, thanks to their ridiculous uncles. One day, karma will come back to bite Kakashi in the A. He thought to himself pleasantly as he traversed down the sidewalk. What was I supposed to do? Oh yeah, find Lee. Where is Lee? Sato had no idea where Lee lived or hung out, yet he did, fortunately, know someone who might. He ended up near his own apartment building. The weapons forge next door looked open and occupied, so he decided to drop by for a minute. The front door was left wide open, and upon entering, Sato's eyes met the display of a countless number of swords, kunai, shuriken, chains, and every other pain-inflicting devices that shinobi adored. They had all been handmade. It's a bit warm in here. Venturing casually to the back, Sato discovered Tenten, hard at work like the bladesmith she was. He watched curiously for a moment as she folded the steel of the blade she was making over a glowing fire, hammering away. Judging that she was drenched in sweat and looked a mess, and that the blade looked like it was coming into its final stage of lamination, he guessed she had been hard at work for a while. Sato cleared his tea loudly to catch her attention. She paused and looked up in mid-swing. Tenten gave him a weary smile, and pulled the blade out of the hearth, setting it in a basin of cold water. The silver-haired boy raised a hand in greeting. "Hello there, neighbor." True, her apartment was only a few doors down from his. "Hi." Tenten removed her gloves, and rubbed the sweat out of her eyes with the back of her hand. "What can I do for you, Sato?" "I've been sent to find Lee," he reported. "I don't suppose you know where he is." "He should still be training with Guy-sensei, I think. Our team uses training area 6, uptown." Tenten answered, leading them to the front of the forge. "Can you believe that Lee's training has actually made my folding better?" She displayed a well-muscled arm, now capable of swinging things many times the weight of a cow. "She's way fitter than I am. I believe it all right." Sato mumbled, "Maybe I should stop by sometime if the results are that good." Tenten smirked, noting his annoyance. "I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He'll run you ragged though. If I can survive Kurenai-sensei's training, I can survive just about anything," he replied, heading out the door. "Thanks Tenten, and oh, good luck on your C-rank mission tomorrow." She frowned to herself after he had gone. Now how did he know about that? The following day, Team 2 had been training rigorously under the watchful eye of their mentor. "Move your feet, Haku," Jiraiya advised, looking up briefly from his book. The dark-haired boy leapt, hurling a few dozen senbon at Gaara, who met them with his sand shield. Round after round of needles, Haku's attacks were utterly useless against his teammate. "I can't keep up long-range attacks. I have to get closer." Haku landed lightly, moving fast and low as Gaara's sand reformed and floated around him. In a bold move, Haku met Gaara's first O of sand with a running kick, breaking through, which the red-haired boy promptly blocked. Senbon were thrown again, only two connected with Gaara's arm and not in critical spots either. Haku cursed his inaccuracy as Gaara hit him with a solid punch that he had no ability to block. Off-balanced and frustrated, Haku was knocked down with another blast of sand, and Jiraiya sniffed at his poor performance. "Geez, looks like my genius student needs to dust up on his taijutsu. Naruto has hit harder than him since he was 6. Where is Naruto-kun?" Haku asked curiously, winded, being that his defense was not nearly as difficult to crack as Gaara's was. He would much rather have the blonde boy as his opponent at the moment. Gaara extracted the needles from his arm and answered, "When he isn't here it usually means he is training with Hinata-chan's team." Haku frowned and stood, brushing himself off. "You shouldn't put ideas into his head. He might get into trouble." "I doubt it." Gaara had earlier informed him that since he had dropped a subtle hint to their blonde friend about Hinata's crush, Naruto had been investigating it thoroughly. Haku feared that if Naruto did not handle the situation properly, that Hinata's feelings could end up getting squashed. Though he often never meant to be, Naruto could be quite destructive when it came to delicate circumstances like that, and Haku was very worried that he may even unintentionally discourage Hinata from her pursuit. He found it amazing that Naruto already had such a faithful admirer, although it could be anyone's guess how long it would be before he recognized it. Gaara just liked to shake things up, in his own lazy sort of way. Jiraiya had put away his notes and turned his gaze to Haku from his seat atop a summoned toad's head. "Haku, I'm going to be honest with you. Your taijutsu needs major improvement, and I mean major, before the Chunin exams begin, got it? It could end up saving your butt if you get yourself into a difficult fight. I've already recommended you guys for the exam, and I won't have any of you making a fool out of me. You do that perfectly well on your own." Gaara pointed out, and the sage ground his teeth at him. Haku had already learned that the hard way. Unlike his teammates, Haku was frail and terribly low on stamina. Where Naruto could easily recover from a hit, Haku often suffered a knockout. The Hyoten boy had to admit, it was difficult to keep up with the abilities of his teammates in terms of chakra, endurance, hand-to-hand combat and general ability. There were moments when he wished he could trade his agility and strategy for better physical qualities. Some are just lucky, I guess. Jiraiya had once told him that they were a fairly balanced team. Haku and Naruto were fast on their feet while Gaara was the stationary, defensive sort. Haku contributed brains to the team and Naruto contributed brute strength, and Gaara was a bit of both worlds for stability. But it was becoming more and more evident that Haku was starting to fall behind. Things just seem to come more easily to them these days. Perhaps it is in the nature of Jinchuriki to adapt rapidly. Since you're so close with Team 13, I suggest you go train with either Neji or Lee in your free time. Gaara commented, noting Haku's troubled expression. They will help you improve more quickly. Haku nodded, since he had even thought of it himself. I did speak with Tenten earlier about it. I will seek him out when they return from their mission. He resolved, glancing over at Jiraiya who had dismissed his toad. Until then, I think we should see where Naruto-kun has been. Near the border of the Fire Country, Team Guy advanced swiftly towards their location. It was a standard C-rank mission and was not scheduled to last more than 2 days. The task was to simply retrieve a scroll that a wealthy lord did not rightfully own, though he claimed it being a divine heirloom of his clan. It was unclear if he was even originally from a clan to start, and there were no reports of encountering any opposing shinobi, so it was deemed another taking candy from a baby sort of mission. Once they had passed through a rocky outcrop of forest, they stopped for a moment of rest on a rock ledge overlooking the palace below. A scrub-covered plain was between them and the destination. The estate further ahead is small and should have relatively weak defenses, Guy announced, grinning in the hazy afternoon light. They will not be expecting ninja to be seeking this scroll. What is our plan, Guy-sensei? Lee was already trembling with excitement. Neji, Tenten, you two will scout ahead near the west side of the estate. The Junin instructor became more serious. If there is no guard stationed there, you will proceed to infiltrate the palace and retrieve the scroll. The records said it is kept separate from other doents on the grounds and should be relatively easy to locate. Tenten nodded, memorizing their instructions. If your approach on the east side of the palace is unguarded, we can expect to rejoin you once we are inside. Neji pointed out keenly and Guy nodded. Yes, Lee and I will follow behind and keep a lookout for sentries. Keep your radios on and we will meet back here before dark. Tenten gingerly adjusted the device secured around her N. Move out. The Hyuga prodigy and his partner darted down the stone slope while Guy and Lee retreated back into the brush forest. Already, Tenten could hear Lee's enthusiastic rambling over the radio, and she smirked in amusement when she saw Neji sigh to himself, also hearing his proclamations. It's definitely clear now. That guy near the shrine just turned the corner. Tenten reported in a low voice, and turned to see Neji beside her, still fiercely examining the inside of the nearby building with his Byakugan. We'll move in now. She nodded and followed him along a tiled wall they had taken cover under. They were lithe shadows as they slipped through a garden, with grey sunlight filtering down through the thick clouds overhead. Tenten found it perplexing how Neji simply slid open a door without an ounce of hesitation once they had gotten close enough, although it was all accredited to the fact that he could see through walls and most other solid objects. She was still amazed at how calm he could be at a time where she could barely handle the adrenaline coursing through her limbs. The smell of burning, bitter incense hung in the air. Tenten, out of habit, drew a kunai as they rounded a corner and flanked down a deserted corridor. It felt almost too quiet as they paused near a wide-open window, which she peeked out of, only to see shadows in an empty courtyard. Neji eyed solid walls keenly, until finally he turned to her, motioning for her to be silent. They passed down another atrociously long hallway, and Tenten could already tell that it had occupants, judging by the recently waxed floor. She delighted in how her feet made no sound as they padded further into the interior of the palace. Not very decorative, are they? She wondered, noting how only a few paintings adorned the walls. It was simple and creepy, and she wanted to find the scroll and get out as fast as possible. Neji, it seemed, was in no rush. They stopped again before the turn of a corner. His voice was low, warning, there are two ahead of us. The room they are stationed in front of has the scroll. You can see it from over here. He gave her a look of incredulity before she shrugged, then asked, right. So can I have first dibs? Neji grinned, knowing exactly what she meant, if you're quick enough. There it was, another competitive challenge during a simple mission. She frowned, knowing he wouldn't deliberately endanger a plan, but still, she wanted to put him in his place. Tenten was down the hallway in less than a second, too fast for them to even realize she was not a resident. The first one managed to draw a kunai in defense, but he was no shinobi. It was a motion she had practiced hundreds of times before. Knock the knife away, jab at the gut, blow to the head, and he was down. She didn't even have to use her blade. Tenten turned in time to see the second guard tumbling down unconscious after a vicious, unrestrained dose of yukin. Neji slid open the door again, not missing a beat. She couldn't help but smile. That was what? 5 seconds. She followed him in and found that the incense had in fact been burning in that room next to a rack that contained a single, crimson-colored scroll. Some useful tips for the future. Follow your nose, it's surprisingly helpful. Tenten, Neji's voice had snapped her out of her thoughts. Let's go. There was a faint crackling over both of their radios, and the distant shout of, "Leaf Hurricane." That grabbed their attention. Tenten gave her partner a pained look, knowing they were both thinking the same thing after what they had heard. The report said no shinobi encounters. You don't think? It didn't say we were the only shinobi searching for this scroll, Neji answered, and her face darkened. We have compeers. Let's go now. Tenten had enough of waiting and she darted out first with Neji close behind her. They retraced the path they had used to infiltrate the palace to find means of an escape. They flew down the last corridor in less than a minute, meeting no resistance, although uproar could be heard from the eastern portion of the estate. Tenten watched their surroundings as they raced by, the door, garden and wall swirling past them as they moved, boundless energy supplied to her legs as she tagged beside Neji. Guy-sensei, what's going on? Her thoughts were frantic as well. Thankfully, the quick escape had granted them a moment to recuperate, so they paused beside an out-of-commission fountain in front of the palace. Guards were scrambling around a ways off, too busy to even notice them. Here, Neji handed her the scroll, which she took with a shaking hand, and watched as he tried to establish communications with the missing half of their team. After a minute of tampering around with the device, the radio was still silent. Tenten sighed, trying to cling to optimism, but it was difficult. He looked thoughtful for a moment before he stood. We should keep moving. It's possible they've already retreated. She nodded, taking a deep breath, and followed after him as they abandoned their hiding spot and raced out onto the scrub plain ahead. The sky darkened and light seemed to shrink away nervously as the two ran in silence through the field, skipping over boulders from time to time. Tenten gave an inquisitive look at the scroll she had been trusted with. Her eyes widened in thought. Neji, I think I know what this is. Tenten paused, glancing over it again to be sure, and he gave her an odd look. His head snapped around, however, after hearing another approaching them fast. Neji, Tenten. Lee stopped in front of them and tried to regain his breath. Tenten was alarmed. Lee. Where's Guy-sensei? He shook his head, a grim expression on his face. He told me to go ahead and rejoin you too. It seems that there are other shinobi who arrived shortly after we did looking for the same scroll. Guy-sensei is fighting one of the rock ninja. I think they are Junin. Neji's eyes widened, not expecting such high-level threats. Junin. From a Wagakur. Tenten found it astounding. What could they possibly want this for? Lee's fists were clenched. I do not know, but Guy-sensei is outnumbered. He may need our help. Tenten turned to Neji, at a loss. It was unthinkable for them to take on a single Junin without their mentor, but if there were more, and from the hidden rock village no less, the mission could become chaotic very quickly. Lee shook silently, standing across from them. He, like Tenten, could think of no course of action that would lead him to success. The silence was long and Neji broke it. We're going back. His teammates looked at him, shocked. Neji wore a defiant expression as he went on. The outcome of this mission is likely to be a failure as it is. It's pointless to leave him behind, he smirked, unless you have doubts. Their stunned expressions seemed to melt away into something close to awe. Neji rarely ever displayed such bravery and leadership, and they felt inspired by his proposition. Tenten grinned, tucking the scroll away. No way. I'm not leaving Guy-sensei behind. Me neither. Lee hollered, fire burning in his eyes. It's settled then. Neji looked pleased with the decisions. We should hurry. They ran fully out in the open with Lee at the front. It seemed absurd for them to return to the estate with it already in turmoil, but they had little else to lose if they chose to take more risks. Tenten's gaze followed Neji as he moved like a breeze over the shrubbery, and she wondered what had suddenly made him decide to turn back. Their return trip was short when Lee skidded to a startled halt, his teammates doing the same shortly after. Ahead, some 24 yards, was one of the rock ninja garbed in dark clothing and a thick vest. He looked surprised to see them heading back in the direction of the tumult, but his expression soon turned to satisfaction to see they were only genin. Great. Lee was right. This guy really is a Junin. Tenten grumbled mentally, trying to form some sort of strategy. Hand it over, kids, and I promise you can run home safe and sound. His voice was a low baritone. It's a wonder you got involved at all. Involved in what? A theft. Tenten's mind was running away with her again. We are not leaving until Guy-sensei comes with us. Lee yowled, giving a shifty look to Neji beside him, who remained motionless. Tenten felt her hand close around a number of shuriken. Just as the rock ninja's eyes fell upon her, Tenten felt her heart jump into her mouth as her teammates charged together. Wait. What are they thinking? It was an impressive sight as for the first few seconds, the rock ninja was too surprised to block, but as seconds ticked by, Lee was given a run for his money. Neji had already activated his Byakugan. Tenten wasn't very inclined to just sit back and watch. Whipping out two of her best scrolls and setting them down, she smirked as she cried out something of a warning to her teammates, Soshoryu. She was in the air a moment later, hurling scythes, swords, kunai and other delightful instruments of pain. Lee ducked out of the way of the assault and Neji blocked out of pure reflex as he continued to jab at the Junin with spikes of yuken. The rock shinobi managed to evade most of the projectiles, although one or two knives protruded from the front of his vest. Their hearts sank as he formed seals and aimed a rock jutsu for Tenten, who was still helpless in the air. Instinctively she raised her arms up in front of her as she fell, trying to lessen the blow, but the sheer force of the boulder knocked the wind out of her even before she had touched the ground. Tenten tumbled down, still fighting fit, trying to regain her breath. Ow. I think he cracked something. Lee, somewhere off to her right, had opened a gate and began to circle around the rock ninja in preparation for an attack at a speed untraceable to the human eye. Neji was already beginning an assault of his own, Haka Rokujuyan Sho. The rock nin had some difficulty blocking while Neji attempted to seal off his tenketsu. Lee was still circling, waiting for Neji to end his attack. That's not going to finish him, Gar. I need to do something. Tenten riffled around for any scroll in her possession and her hand closed around one which she quickly inspected. Oh. But this is just the one we stole. Still, I thought it was, well, it could be a. Out of hurried curiosity, she opened it. What she saw made her shudder in excitement. A summoning scroll. It's a weapon too. I can't believe my luck. Her eyes scrambled around, looking for a place to sign it, mission or no mission, I don't care, I'm not passing this up. Only one name had been signed in the space before hers and it looked very outdated. I wonder why this hasn't been in use. Using the stolen time from Lee and Neji's distraction, she hastily bit her thumb and signed her name hurriedly in B, unable to suppress her grin. As she stood and darted further away to put more distance between herself and the fracas, her eyes passed over a small, faded kanji near the top of the scroll. It looks old, but it's in good shape. It looks like a bow of some sort. Great. I can work with that. Tenten leapt up to the top of a rock outcrop, overhearing Lee trying to perform primary lotus. Without wasting a moment she summoned the weapon, and in a flash of smoke her excited grin turned into a frown of the utmost bafflement. It was a golden Yumi, long bow, tall enough so that it reminded her of her new Zanbato, which she had lovingly nicknamed, Kaokei. The bow was among the most magnificent of bamboo Yumi she had ever laid eyes on, with small, red seals lining it down the side. After the momentary euphoria of her success, the horror kicked in. Wait a minute. It's just the Yumi, but no arrows. Anyone well practiced in the art of Kyudo would first condition their be and relax, but Tenten was beside herself over not having thought of bringing arrows with her. Her brain was scrambling, and the sight of Lee getting knocked back a few dozen feet by an earth jutsu was not helping her relax. No arrows. No haya or otoya. I'm screwed. How I am supposed to use this? Her eyes darted frantically up and down the beautiful Yumi. Now I get why no one used this thing. It's completely. Tenten's breath hitched when her dark eyes noticed an odd kanji at the center of the bow which could be distinguished clearly. Molded chakra, what the heck is that supposed to mean? She figured any shinobi could be discouraged by such a puzzling weapon, even the ones from Awagakure, PFT, as if they'll figure out how to. Chakra. She understood. Does this mean, use chakra as an arrow? Tenten figured that was her only option. Focusing chakra into her right hand, she laid it over the seal as she held the Yumi steady with her left hand. Her excitement returned as she pulled back, and a blue shaft of light formed. Now that was progress. She strung her chakra ya to the bow, her heart hammering so loud she was sure she could hear it, and pulled back, eyeing her teammates as they relentlessly attacked the Junin. Tenten's aim was on the spot. The trouble was that Lee and Neji were still in the way. Move. She must have screamed it at the top of her lungs as she launched. The three shinobi below her looked up, startled, only seeing a flash of blue soaring towards them. As expected, Lee did not have to be told twice as he raced out of the way, not certain what was going on. Neji, on the contrary, was a bit preoccupied as the rock nin continued to fight, this time drawing a sword. Halfway in its trajectory, in less than a second, the chakra arrow did something rather peculiar. It lit on fire spontaneously and there was the briefest of panicked moments as it landed squarely, unaffected by wind or resistance at the Junin's feet, setting off and exploding like some sort of grenade. Neji deflected the blast at the last second with Kaiten. The rock ninja was less lucky. Further beyond the fresh crater lay their opponent, unconscious, and then sporting some nasty third-degree burns. All that from this thing. Tenten eyed the Yumi, smiling, I'll be sorry when I have to hand it over to Hokage-sama. Down the slope of the outcrop, Lee looked up at Tenten, whooping and hollering, Tenten. That was amazing. I have never seen such destruction with a single shot. Me neither, she muttered, beginning to stow it away. Neji, who recovered the fastest from Tenten's frightening attack, made certain their opponent was knocked out before calling over to them, we should keep moving. Lee nodded, still excited from the battle. Tenten didn't want to rush the care of her new favorite weapon, you guys go ahead without me. I'll catch up in a minute. They left a moment later and she continued to store away the Yumi, regarding it with admiring eyes. We were chased out here after they discovered us, Lee explained as he led Neji past the tree line into the surrounding forest of the estate. This is where I last saw Guy-sensei. Neji had activated the Byakugan and was already examining the area. Lee paused, hesitant to go any farther. Shouldn't we wait for Tenten? She'll be right behind us. Neji dismissed the thought as he searched for signs of their mentor. All at once, the two-leaf ninja leapt back to avoid the shuriken that rained down where they had been standing. They looked up to see another rock shinobi, perched on top of a nearby rock ledge. He looked a bit older than them. Both Lee and Neji were confident at that point after having defeated a Junin. The Chunin before them did not seem at all threatening. Fair. Clearly he was displeased with his aim, as he made a reach for more shuriken. Where is Guy-sensei? Lee demanded, taking an offensive stance. If you mean that crazy guy with the stupid haircut, the rock nin smirked, my squad leader is handling him right now. Lee glared at him but knew better than to be provoked. Neji, even without using the Byakugan, noticed the earth clone of the rock ninja that had crept up behind them and he turned, signaling for Lee to move. After avoiding its surprise attack and reducing it to a pile of dirt with a blast of yuken, Neji was about to destroy the other two clones closing in. Lee had found one of them and was already attempting to dispatch it, not prepared for when the original rock Chunin attacked from underground, Dotten, in a decapitation jutsu. Taken by surprise, Lee was suddenly dragged underground, leaving only his head exposed above the surface. He wore a baffled look as the earth clones approached. Neji easily destroyed them with two well-placed jabs, and after seeing that Lee was stuck he continued on to get rid of the young rock nin. In his rush, he evaded the rest of the shuriken the rock Chunin hurled at him with ease. Unfortunately, after he sealed only two tenketsu, the rock ninja managed one last panic jutsu. Neji failed to avoid the rock slide that came crashing down beside him, obscuring him from Lee's view. Lee spat out a mouthful of dust, blare. Neji. It was quiet for a long moment. Out of the rubble, brushing dust from his arms the rock ninja appeared, coughing and sputtering after his reckless move. Lee fell silent and watched as the rock shinobi descended the slope, pleased with his handiwork. Did he really get Neji? It seemed so. Not a moment later, Tenten came diving through the trees, throwing round after round of kunai. One of which, with an exploding tag attached, landed nearby Lee as he began to wriggle out of his prison. Tenten. He was see off as the tag detonated and thankfully gave him enough leverage from the debris to free himself. The rock Chunin blocked her hail of knives and ducked back, not expecting another to show up. She landed in front of Lee with a kunai raised in front of her. He sighed in relief. Where's Neji? Tenten gave him a sideways glance. He was injured and I think. Then take him and go ahead and find Guy-sensei, Tenten answered. Eyes set on the Iwa Nin, there's no use waiting around here. Lee gave her an incredulous look, but Tenten, what about you? I can handle it, she said curtly, watching as the rock ninja began to form seals. With a compliant nod, Lee darted over to the rock pile as Tenten leapt at the opposing shinobi. After leaning the unconscious Hyuga prodigy on his shoulder, he bolted, hoping she would end this battle as decisively as she had ended the last. Again, the Chunin used a rock jutsu which she easily avoided by taking cover in a tree. The shuriken he threw as a follow-up she deflected and threw back at him. Tenten was still fresh with energy and she could tell her opponent was wearing down. If I stay up here, I can avoid his earth jutsu no problem, she decided, jumping up higher and higher into the canopy of old oaks. Without warning he appeared behind her and her full in the back. He only destroyed a subsuit. Again he was frustrated. Why don't you come out of hiding, little girl? Your teammates aren't here to save you. Tenten already had a summoning scroll out, moving fast. In her mind, she thanked Lee for all of his training as her beloved Zanbato appeared and she took hold of its hilt with calloused, practiced hands. The Chunin settled on a lower branch, still searching for her with a kunai in hand. Suddenly she was falling with the weight of the blade, and she seemed to fly downward, in a silent free fall through the treetops, crashing down next to his position. Tenten watched as his eyes widened in shock, probably due to never seeing such a weapon before. And it happened with her mind elsewhere. The blade swung nearly on its own accord and bisected him right through his middle. The rock nin gave a startled, choked gasp before he fell back off of the branch in two halves. She rested on bent knee and leaned on the stained blade. She panted heavily. Tenten could tell she had won even before she had summoned the sword. With only half a mind and a conscience that seemed to be frozen over, she unsummoned her blade without cleaning it, her arms trembling from the effort. Tenten hadn't wanted to K him, but he had gotten in the way. If she hadn't stopped him, he would have surely gone after her friends. The next thought that did cross her foggy mind happened to be something less important. I'm definitely not calling it Kaokei anymore. Remind me again why we're not out training. Naruto yawned, preparing ramen for his breakfast. It was the day before the Chunin exam and the three boys of Team 2 lazed about at home early that morning. Jiraiya-sensei feels we should rest our bee and minds for the day so we can be fresh for tomorrow, Haku answered, busy sweeping. Today we relax. The blonde boy smirked at him. You don't seem very relaxed to me, Haku-kun. Haku frowned at him. If I don't do the housework it'll never get done. Naruto nodded, knowing that neither he nor Gaara were keen on chores, at least not the way Haku was. Somehow during their years spent living together Haku had assumed the role of housekeeper. On the couch Gaara was spread out, dozing lightly. Though they didn't admit it, the boys all had the pre-exam jitters, or so Jiraiya had labeled it. They didn't know what to expect from the exam besides the participation of shinobi from distant countries. It was anyone's guess what would happen after they took the plunge into the fierce contest of becoming Chunin. Gaara was confident enough to sleep on the idea. Naruto and Haku, on the other hand, were a different story. Finished with his cleaning, Haku sat across from Naruto at the table and helped himself to some instant ramen. Naruto slurped his noodles slowly, staring down into his cup. So, tell me about your training with Hinata-chan, Haku said after a moment, looking sly. Gaara says you've been going to see her often now. The blonde boy's face lit up at the subject. Yeah, Hinata-chan is awesome to spar with. Her taijutsu totally rules out yours and Gaara's. I can imagine. Haku sighed. She's great, but Naruto's smile faded. Her clan has issues. I've never seen people more stuck up. And they make her out to be some kind of joke. It's completely unfair, Haku-kun. The Hyuga's strict traditions make them quite narrow-minded. The dark-haired boy agreed, taking a nip at his ramen, but what do they have against Hinata-chan? Her dad thinks she's worthless and that Neji's some kind of saint. Naruto had stopped eating, and his raised voice caught Haku by surprise. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable that she's even related to them at all. Gaara smirked from his place on the sofa. And Hinata-chan, she keeps trying so hard. When I'm Hokage, I'm gonna set that clan straight, just wait and see. Naruto gestured with his chopsticks. Haku smiled and with an earnest voice answered, Naruto, you really will be the most virtuous of leaders this village has ever had. I will cherish the day your face joins those on the Hokage monument. Naruto wore an astounded look upon hearing his friend's sincere words, and then nodded quietly, unsure of what to say. In his own mind, Gaara agreed with Haku's declaration. I spoke with Sakura-chan yesterday after I ran into her uptown. Haku changed the subject with flawless timing. Naruto wore a surprised expression. Really? I haven't seen her in a while. Gaara's smirk vanished. Yes, she and her teammates have been thoroughly preparing for the exam, although she seemed a bit nervous, Haku added thoughtfully, not unlike us. Fair. We'll do fine. I still think we're the best team in this entire village. Naruto grinned confidently, having faith in his team's abilities. Without any kind of warning, Gaara rose from the couch and left the apartment. His friends blinked in confusion. The door closed behind Gaara gently and Naruto stared after him inquisitively. Where does he think he's going? Gaara-kun can handle himself, Haku said simply, let him go where he likes. Sakura walked down the side of the street carrying a bag of groceries. Even the day before the Chunin exam her pushy mother still had her running errands. Unable to help herself after seeing the beautiful display of chrysanthemum, Sakura stole a peek in both directions before stopping for a moment in front of the Yamanaka flower shop. She took an indulgent sniff of the bright blossoms, trying to calm her jumbled nerves. Ino had stepped out at that precise moment to add another mum to the display. At first sight, Ino had actually been glad to see her. Even though she had been Sakura's top compore during their time at the academy, and then after, she couldn't help but have a soft spot for the pink-haired girl. Like she'd ever show it. Well, forehead girl. Fancy seeing you here. Ino gave her a look. How's Sasuke-kun doing? Sakura turned slowly to face her, refusing to take the bait. Hello there, Ino pig, she smiled back. He's fine. Ino still wanted to strike a nerve and get a rise out of her. Good. I'm looking forward to a date with him one of these days. It isn't as if I have any companion. Sakura was surprised at how boring the conversation was. Yup. Ino, flustered, couldn't help but become aggravated at Sakura's submissive attitude. Why did you come over here anyway? Is something bothering you, other than the fact that you're going to fail the exam tomorrow? My team and I will do just fine tomorrow, Ino, Sakura answered, turning away from the flower display. You should save your concerns for your own team. In her mind, inner Sakura was raving, Char. Toss that one right back at her. Before coming up with a snappy retort, Ino's eyes happened over a lone figure across the street that immediately gave her the creeps. I don't see him come around here often. Sakura followed the blonde-haired girl's gaze to the opposite side of the road where Gaara stood in the shadow of a tall building, watching her impassively. The pink-haired girl felt her brain slosh around in her stomach. Ino didn't overlook Sakura's bewilderment. Steeling herself, Sakura took a deep breath and straightened the paper bag in her arms. I'll see you later, Ino. With wary steps Sakura crossed the street to him, hoping this meeting would be on peaceful terms. Ino set down the flower pot in her arms and smiled, finding the scene intriguing. Maybe I'm wrong about Sakura. It looks like she's got different goals than I thought she did. The pink-haired girl tried to avoid eye contact as she approached, but it was an arduous task. She gulped, trying to gather her wits. It's just Gaara-kun. Everything is going to be okay. Hi. Her mouth had acted on its own. It was then she realized time had not slowed down, and that she was standing only a few feet away from him. He looked so far away. He did not answer in words but instead gave a slight tilt of his head, gesturing for her to follow. Sakura ambled after him as he entered the alleyway behind them and leapt with ease up onto a fire escape. Readjusting her parcel, Sakura made the jump as well, and then proceeded to follow him up onto the aluminum roof of a tattered building. They stood for a moment, facing each other awkwardly. He doesn't look mad, she thought. Sakura forced herself to smile, trying to calm herself down. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you and the others doing? Gaara shrugged. The simple action helped her relax fully and she was glad to see he wasn't in one of his wrathful moods. Sakura found she was able to form words easily again. Well, I can't tell you how excited I am about the exam tomorrow. I just know we're going to do great. Sakura was in one of her rambling states of mind. Kakashi-sensei says that we should expect to be competing with ninja from other villages, and we should be as healthy as possible when the exam starts. She paused, seeing that he was once again listening intently. Things are going to get really crazy come tomorrow. The silence that followed made her more alert to the fluttering creature in her stomach. I don't blame you. He spoke at long last. Sakura gave him a quizzical look. Blame me. For what? For you telling your teammates about us? He ignored her terrified look. It was the right thing to do. Teammates should not keep secrets from each other. She shook her head. They weren't my secrets to share. Gaara's face gave no trace of emotion. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Yeah, she mumbled, a small smile finding its way to her face. With no change in inflection, he added, I'm disappointed in you. Her face froze up in response, not comprehending. I don't get it. He tells me that it's alright and now he's sending me on another guilt trip. I was disappointed that you didn't believe I would forgive you. Gaara said quietly, as if she couldn't have figured it out for herself. Something you should keep in mind, Sakura, is that I am your friend. I could never hate you, but I will warn you to be cautious of your actions from here on out. My temper gets the best of me at times. She was surprised by his sage piece of advice. Sakura then understood why he had sought her out. I suppose he wanted to be honest about his feelings with me, without using Naruto or Haku as a go-between. I will, she answered softly, finding it hard to look at him. Good luck for tomorrow. The following day was cloudy and a sharp tension filled the air. Naruto, Gaara and Haku had only caught a brief glimpse of Jiraiya before heading off to the academy. He was not thrilled that he had to contribute a few hours of community service before going to check up on them. His parting words had been, knock, ms. At the present time, Naruto and his teammates were making their way through the busy corridor of the second floor, listening as Haku quizzed them on questions they may be confronted with. It was, after all, a formal exam. Mental preparation would be helpful. There's no way you can K someone like that, Haku-kun, Naruto retorted, as they passed by a group of lost-looking rain ninja. Senbon don't K people. They can. Gaara said simply, it's just that Haku doesn't K people. You're not qualified to talk about this subject, Naruto grumbled, disliking his lack of knowledge, except for maybe the, K part. The red-haired boy only sighed. On to the next question. Haku pressed on as they passed by a crowd of desperate, young ninja gathered around a blocked door. I hope they realize that this is the second floor and that is only a genjutsu. They'll figure it out for themselves eventually, the blonde smirked. Now, next question, and make it easier. Alright. Haku took a moment to think. 3 shinobi are guarding a scroll. Shinobi A is directly behind Shinobi B and directly left of Shinobi C. If Shinobi A and Shinobi B are 15 feet apart, and Shinobi B and Shinobi C are 17 feet apart, what is the distance between Shinobi A and Shinobi C? I said easier, Haku-kun. Not crazy math stuff. Gaara had already worked it out, 8 feet. That's right. Haku nodded happily. Naruto gave Gaara an annoyed look before shrugging. Well. You always were good at math. They reached the third floor, which was relatively clear of ninja, with the exception of shouts coming from down the hall. The genin of Team 2 exchanged short glances before moving on, wondering what the fuss was about. The boys passed over a balcony and below it they discovered Lee challenging another ninja. You. The one with the bad attitude. Oh no. Haku was alarmed by the sight. On the floor below them was Team 7 and Lee, who was glaring at Sasuke. The Uchiha seemed relatively unfazed by Lee's presence. Naruto chuckled, not expecting confrontations before the exam. Then again, he had to consider how Lee adored camaraderie and punished disrespect. Sasuke was bound to strike a nerve if they crossed paths. Rock Lee, challenge you to a fight. Lee was clearly overexcited and without his teammates. Still, Sasuke wasn't looking very much bothered. Kiba and Sakura could only observe in exasperation, fearing that Lee was too riled up to think rationally. Gaara decided to save him the trouble. You shouldn't waste your time here, Lee. Lee was surprised by the comment and looked up, as did the other Leaf Genin. Lee immediately lost interest in his challenge of the Uchiha survivor, and leapt up onto the balcony to join Team 2. Ah. It is good to see you, comrades. This indeed is a momentous day, is it not? Below, Sasuke looked nonplussed. Lee's attention span didn't linger on sneering opponents. He seemed to naturally gravitate to friendlier people. How are you, Lee? Haku gave him a small smile. It looks like Neji and Tenten aren't with you. Yes. They went on ahead while I stayed behind too. Lee glanced back down at Sasuke, frowning. Test myself against one of the geniuses of Konoha. He then turned his attention back to Haku. Of course, there may be a better time and place for it. Are you and your teammates ready for the exam? Of course we are, fuzzy brows. Naruto replied enthusiastically. Haku's been giving us drills all morning. Haku wore a troubled look, but Gaara seemed just as confident as Naruto did. Hey, I don't mean to interrupt your shouting match up there, but if you guys don't quit it you'll be late for the first part of the exam. Kiba pointed out, sick of delays. Akamaru yapped in agreement from atop his head. Kiba turned to Sakura. Let's get going. She nodded to him and looked up to Lee and Team 2, giving him a parting smile. Sakura followed after her teammates in silence, hoping that she was hiding her nerves well. He is right, Lee nodded sagely, taking the Inuzuka boy's advice. I shall now go and return to my team. In a flash of bright, green youth he departed down the hallway, radiating confidence. I wonder what that was all about. Naruto said, stretching his arms over his head as he, Haku and Gaara continued on. I know Sasuke's not exactly what you'd call friendly, but Lee looked ticked off. Haku stared ahead at Gaara's gourd as they walked, frowning inwardly. I can't say that I know. Gaara didn't bother sharing his opinion, but he didn't have to. His teammates were already aware of his opinion of Sasuke. When they were younger, Gaara had missed out on the fateful day Sasuke's family had been annihilated. While Naruto and Haku assured him that it was a good thing he had, and that no one should have to witness something as macabre as the sight of that bee mansion, they themselves wondered if that was one of the reasons Gaara seemed to detach himself from the very thought of the Uchiha survivor, harboring no sympathy for him whatsoever. Naruto often called it Gaara's pet peeve. The mere mentioning of Sasuke seemed to plaster a scowl on the red-haired boy's face for hours on end. Haku had tried to discover the roots for his extreme detestation, but there seemed to be no motive. That was, until recently, they had gained a rather ominous clue. Things began to go downhill with Gaara's mood swings as Sakura had been placed on the same cell as the young Uchiha. Sakura and Sasuke seemed to share an unidentifiable bond, as subtle and obscure as it was. Gaara noticed it better than anyone, and he spat on and shunned the idea of the two actually being friends, through glares and silent protest. In short, both Haku and Naruto had concluded that Gaara felt at least slightly threatened by Sasuke, with regards to Sakura. Though I guess it's got to be more complicated than that. Naruto assumed, Gaara-kun won't say a word about it. When he was ranting about Sakura a while back, he didn't say anything that proved he likes her. He can be such a prick sometimes. I guess I'm used to it by now. Gaara kept walking silently, sensing his teammates' anxiety. He chose to ignore it. Naruto slid open the door on the far end of the hallway and his expression turned to one of astonishment. The same could be said for both Haku and Gaara as well. The auditorium was packed. Teams of shinobi from many different villages were seated at desks or standing along the walls, huddled together talking, scheming, praying and other such activities to pass the time. The cacophony of the room was deafening. Wow, a lot of ninja turned out. Naruto muttered, still visibly amazed so many people could fit in one place. He and his teammates ventured inside, keeping a wary eye on the foreign shinobi hanging about. The blonde boy's shock turned into fascination at all of the different headbands he was seeing: grass, cloud, sand, sound, rain. He grinned at Haku. Hey. Maybe some mist ninja showed up too, Haku-kun. Gloomily, Haku shook his head. I wish. The Hidden Mist Village has had its own Chunin selection exam for quite some time, Naruto-kun. I don't think they're fond of interacting with other countries. Naruto sighed in defeat at the news. There just seemed to be no way to cheer Haku up with the idea of being reunited with his kindred. They lingered near the back of the room, where thankfully, a cluster of Konoha genin resided. Naruto didn't overlook Hinata seated between Shino and Sato at a desk in the far right corner. He shouted and waved, "Hey, Hinata-chan." Her cheeks tinged pink as he approached, followed by a smirking Gaara and Haku. "Hello Naruto-kun," she said softly, smiling. "Hello Gaara-kun, Haku-kun." Shino nodded to them as well, which was something uncommon on his part. The blonde boy turned to see Sato next to Hinata, his head buried in his folded arms on top of the desk. He frowned to himself in puzzlement, having never seen him in such a state. "Is Sato-kun feeling well?" Haku asked, not wanting to disturb him. Hinata glanced over at her silver-haired teammate. "He's been sleeping since we arrived. I'm not sure what is troubling him, but Sato-kun hasn't been very anxious at all over the exam. His unusual lack of energy may be attributed to matters that we are not permitted to discuss." Shino added cryptically, which was little help. Hinata, however, only nodded in agreement, giving a worried glance to their less than perky teammate. "That's gotta suck, being sick on the day of the Chunin exam." Naruto assumed he was ill. "Hopefully he won't hold you guys back. I'm sure he'll catch a second wind," Hinata said softly, hoping that was the case. Gaara had his arms folded and he gave a thoughtful glance to the young Hatake. He too found his lack of liveliness to be disconcerting. Haku looked to his left to see Kiba and his teammates approaching, along with the members of Team 10. Sakura and Ino appeared to be having a heated argument already. So many are participating, it seems that a majority are actually Leaf Shinobi as well. Haku was trying to get a head count on their campaign. It looks like you're all a bunch of newbies this year." A voice came from behind them, and they turned around to see another Konoha genin, straightening out his glasses. "You better watch your step. This is one tough crowd." Naruto gave him an odd look. Who are you supposed to be?" The boy smiled back at Naruto. "Me. My name is Yakushi Kabuto," he then chuckled, "and you are Uzumaki Naruto." The blonde boy was startled. "How'd you know that?" Kabuto smirked. "I know all there is to know about the genin participating in this year's exam." He paused, glancing over to Haku and then Gaara. "That is to say, I'm an old pro. I've failed this exam 7 times. 7 times. Haku and Naruto spoke in unified disbelief. He nodded gravely. "Yes. This isn't a game. The Chunin selection exams are the dividing line between academy students and true ninja, and it's no easy line to cross. It's a test that many rookies take lightly and well." Kabuto sighed. "They come to regret it." Shikamaru, with Chuji munching a bag of pretzels beside him, gave a suspicious glance to the strange Konoha genin, finding his words to be a bit theatrical. He reflected on how the difficulty of the exam could prevent him from advancing, especially when he lacked the full incentive to actually pass it to begin with. Ino and Sakura had ended their loud discussion and took a moment to heed the seasoned genin's advice. "All my time spent taking the exams hasn't been wasted," Kabuto smirked to himself, pushing his glasses further up the bridge of his nose. "From my experiences, I've compiled these ninfo cards." He displayed a deck of cards, whose faces appeared blank. "They contain information on every genin here." Sakura's eyebrows knitted into a frown. "But those cards are blank." He nodded. "They are now. But once I pump a bit of chakra into them, they become more useful." Kabuto demonstrated by squatting down and placing a single card on the floor. He tapped it with his index finger, injecting a small amount of chakra. After a moment, an image appeared on the once blank card. Haku took a mental note of the trick, finding it interesting. Again, Kabuto smirked, very full of himself. "These cards are the fruit of all my toils. There's not one ninja around who I don't have details on." His audience at that point had no doubt about it, having never witnessed something like it before. Still, proof would help the skeptics rest easy. Sasuke frowned. He had his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Then you have information on the rookie genin as well?" "Of course." Kabuto again readjusted his glasses. "Name anyone." "I have them." Sasuke was thoughtful for a moment and Kiba and Sakura both gave him contemplative looks. "Rock Lee," Sasuke suggested, thinking of his most recent encounter. A moment later a small smirk appeared on his face, and Gaara. Naruto felt the hair on the back of his end stand on end before he turned to his red-headed friend. Both he and Haku stole a glimpse of their teammate. He seemed outwardly relaxed, almost as if he hadn't heard Sasuke's request. Yet beneath the facade Naruto could tell he was barely leashing the K intent that often radiated off of him in waves. After a short search through the deck, Kabuto retrieved a blank card and fed it chakra to make the information visible. Here we are, Rock Lee. It looks like he graduated a year before you did. He is the student of Mitogai and his teammates are Hyuga Neji and Tenten. He blinked and then continued, it says here that he's improved greatly in taijutsu, but has no talent for either genjutsu or ninjutsu. His team has completed 30 D rank missions and 12 C rank missions. Sakura held her breath as Gaara's card was also found and she stole a glance at Haku and Naruto. They also looked a bit nervous. The red-haired boy was silent as he watched, wondering what his own stats were. This is it, Gaara. Wow, looks like he and his teammates are being trained by one of the legendary three, Jiraiya. Kabuto was impressed. His teammates are Uzumaki, Naruto and Haku. He well-rounded in taijutsu and has potential for genjutsu. His ninjutsu far exceeds genin skill. Naruto and his teammates relaxed, seeing that there was no critical information listed on the card. His team has completed 33 D rank missions, 4 C rank missions and, whoa. Get this, 1 A rank mission lead by Mitarashi Anko. Kabuto read the last of the information with an air of incredulity. Stunned, the rest of the rookie genin turned to give a hearty stare to Team 2, unsure if what Kabuto had listed was even accurate. Sasuke and his teammates were clearly baffled. Naruto, Haku and Gaara only snickered, not expecting their mission to the Land of Waves to be recorded. The Hokage must have posted the results immediately upon their return. Well, it looks like Konoha has some of the toughest campaign this year. Kabuto concluded, stowing away his prized ninfo cards. Some other ninja to watch out for come from Sand and Rain, but I wouldn't worry too much about any grass or sound shinobi, they're pushovers. Cloud Ninja are a force to be reckoned with, however there are few participants this year. A short distance away a team of sound ninja listened in, not liking Kabuto's viewpoint on their village's strength. It's surprising though, I didn't think Cloud would participate with us at all, Kabuto went on, gesturing towards a team on the far side of the room that seemed to be chatting idly with each other, and the sound village is relatively new and not very large. He added, smirking, I feel those ninja won't be much of a threat. Naruto was about to ask him why that was before one of the eavesdropping sound ninja nearby rushed over to Kabuto with an incredible speed. He was nearly unable to block the incoming punch that forced him back a few feet. Hinata gave a small chirp of alarm while other leaf genin flared up their senses for a fight. The bandaged sound nin stood warily in front of Kabuto, unwilling to back off. Kabuto tried not to appear intimidated. Haku, with the exception of Shikamaru, was the least inclined to start a riot over the assault. We can be disqualified before the exam even begins if we cause trouble now. Other ninjas seated nearby looked on curiously, wondering if things would get ugly. The sound ninja's voice was a low growl, you do well to not underestimate the shinobi from my village, Kerr. Kabuto readjusted his glasses, smiling at him, perhaps I will, but this doesn't prove much to me you know. He stopped speaking and fell to his knees retching. The lenses in his glasses had cracked and it was evident there were signs of a silent attack. Kabuto. Naruto reacted the most sympathetically, as was his nature, are you alright? A few other leaf genin helped him stand as the sound ninja stalked off, fuming. Kabuto wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, muttering, I see, so it was that kind of jutsu. I should have been more cautious. Gaara merely blinked at Haku, feeling that the know-it-all genin had brought it upon himself. Haku sighed. He was grateful they had avoided an all-out brawl. As the noise level in that part of the room began to steadily increase once again, it seemed as if the incident had been forgotten. Quiet. There was a shout that could be heard over the raucous and the assembled genin quickly hushed. Their attention rested on a man at the front of the room. He was clad in a dark overcoat and a fierce expression resided on his scarred face. He continued speaking, before the first part of the Chunin selection exam commences you all will be randomly seated by number. Do not expect to be placed by your teammates in this part of the exam. After a moment or so names were called and categorized into different rows. Of the rookie leaf genin Haku was the first to be called. Giving a cheerful expression to his teammates he went ahead to one of the rows nearest to the front, leaving the other genin to contemplate their positions. It took a long while to seat all of the genin, but once the process was finished, Naruto relaxed a margin. He had been lucky enough to be seated next to the shy Hyuga girl. He grinned at her, whispering, "Hey Hinata-chan. You see our teammates anywhere? I can't spot em." With a blink, she nodded. "I saw Gara-kun near the back before I was seated and Sato-kun is just a few seats right of you." The blonde boy turned to have a look and saw the silver-haired boy nearby. His head was still resting on his folded arms. "Wow, he looks like crap. Are you sure he's going to be alright?" She sighed. "I really don't know. Listen up. All heads faced front. For many of you this is your first time taking the exam. Pay attention because I will not repeat myself." He cleared his tea. "My name is Morino Abiki and I will be your proctor for the first part of the Chunin selection exam." The room was very still after that and Naruto noticed Hinata shifting uncomfortably in her seat. "The first portion of the exam will be the written test," Abiki went on. "There are 9 questions on the written exam. Each of you will start with 10 points each. Every time you are caught cheating, 2 points will be deducted from your score. Anyone who is caught cheating more than 5 times will fail and any team whose combined scores are 15 points or less fail. After the 45-minute period you are given to answer the test questions, a 10th question will be administered." Naruto leaned his chin on his hand, absorbing the information, and then turned to Hinata. "Geez. So many rules. They really put you through the ropes with all this stuff." The shy girl nodded silently. "The sentries stationed about the room are there to make sure you do not cheat," the proctor informed a few puzzled genin, who were startled by the hawk-like guards nearby. "There will be no talking after the tests are handed out." Abiki smirked. "Good luck." The scratching of pencils was absent as the tests were distributed, but Naruto's attention was focused on Haku who was only a few rows ahead of him. The moment the dark-haired boy had been handed the test he had just started scribbling. The blonde boy frowned to himself. "I didn't know Haku-kun was left-handed. I believe he is ambidextrous, Naruto-kun," Hinata said softly, smiling as she signed her name on the top of her own paper. He nodded to her, but was still confused. "I can't believe I never noticed that." Without further preamble Naruto glanced over his own test after signing his name. "Okay. Question number 1. 3 shinobi are guarding a scroll. Shinobi A is directly behind Shinobi B and directly left of Shinobi C. If Shinobi A and Shinobi B are 15 feet apart, and Shinobi B and Shinobi C are 17 feet apart, what is the— Wait a minute. I know this question." Naruto scratched his head, wondering what the odds were that Haku had actually given him the first question to the written exam. "Whoa, that's creepy, huh? What did Gara-kun say the answer was?" 8 feet. He scribbled that down before he could forget it. He smiled inwardly. "All right. No sweat on the first one. Now to number 2. Maybe Haku had inadvertently given him the answers to the other questions as well. Unfortunately, he found the question asked for the elemental weakness of earth element jutsu. Okay, skip that one. The third question was even worse. How am I supposed to know how that jutsu works? Next one. Again he moved ahead, only to find he could not answer any of the following questions. Ugh. Every one of these is harder than the one before. Sweat began to form on his brow and he kept his eyes firmly glued to his own paper, even though he could not make heads or tails of any of it. Oh no. Oh no 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 no. Haku-kun and Gara-kun, they're gonna kill me. He pictured the looming figures of his best friends at the idea of him failing, and in short, failing all of them. There's no way I can answer any of these. I've gotta cheat. There's no other way. Abiki's words of warning on cheating replayed in his head. Gar. But if I do then I might get caught and fail anyway. How am I supposed to? Naruto-kun. A faint whisper sounded from beside him. The panicked blonde glanced over to Hinata. Oh, what is it Hinata-chan? Her face heated up. Well, I just thought that if you were having trouble, I could share my answers with you, if you like. He raised his eyebrows. You'd really do that, Hinata-chan? Of course. Her soft voice trembled. You have been such a help to me. I wouldn't mind at all. He grinned at her and gave a tiny nod as her fully filled out paper slipped from beneath her left arm almost imperceptibly, and his cerulean eyes began to scan over the answer of the second question. Hey, she must have gotten the answers with her Byakugan, I bet. Not a second afterward, a pencil met a clipboard, scratching fiercely. Naruto glanced over to the sentry who had jotted his name down, smirking at him. No. I guess this just won't work. Hinata-chan, I can't. He turned his face away from her and she looked dismayed. I don't want you to get into trouble and besides. Naruto looked back and gave her a foxy grin. I'll make it. I have to if I'm gonna be Hokage. With a blush, she nodded, pulling her paper away quietly. A moment later, Naruto was busy panicking again. Who am I kidding? I'm screwed. Elsewhere in the room, Gaara had finished copying his answers with a technique he had developed during the last few months of his training with Jiraiya. He had called it simply, Daisen no Mi, forming a third eye out of sand which was connected to his optic nerves and required very little chakra. Naruto, upon seeing it for the first time, called it the creepy sand eye, and asked him not to do it again because he found it gross. Gaara told him it was an irrational fear since it was an object comprised of only sand and chakra, but the blonde boy had different opinions. Near the front of the classroom, Haku had answered all of his questions within the first 10 minutes. With a sigh of relief, he put his pencil down and closed his eyes, thinking the situation over. Gaara-kun won't need much help, but I doubt Naruto will be able to answer anything beyond the first question. I'm sure he won't mind if I assist him. As Naruto leaned over his test, fidgeting nervously in his seat, and he almost missed his one and only salvation as it formed next to his paper. His shifty eyes strayed downward to where a small, icy mirror had appeared out of thin air. In it there was the unmistakable reflection of a paper, completely filled out. Ha! Haku-kun, you're the best. Quickly, he picked up his pencil and filled out the remaining questions on his test, grinning all the while. Hinata merely gave him a confused look but then smiled to herself, glad he had found a less risky way to obtain information. For good measure, Haku had sent an ice mirror over to Gaara as well. Naruto finished copying down the answers Haku had so easily supplied him with and sat back, chuckling maniacally to himself. I never would have thought Haku-kun's ice doohickeys could be so useful. Now we'll definitely ace this exam. The blonde boy gave a small smirk to Hinata, who only blushed in response. He let his eyes wander about the room, averting test sheets, and saw how the rest of the genin were doing. To his left, Sato had woken from his depressed slumber. He wore a dark frown as he scratched answers down onto his paper. Unknown to Naruto, he was guided by the movements of a tiny beetle. The blonde boy only raised his eyebrows, wondering what had him in such a funk. A short distance off he spotted Sakura, who looked as if she too had finished with her exam as well. She had turned over her paper. Chuji was seated further ahead to the right and looked as if he were finishing his test as well. Wow. These people are either really smart or really good cheaters. And not a moment after Naruto had thought that to himself, a sentry on the side of the room hurled a pen at someone on the far left, startling the genin as the pen stuck up from the center of his paper. He looked up, horrified, as the sentry smirked at him. You're done. I've been watching you. Your 5 chances have been spent. You and your teammates fail. But I wasn't cheating. I swear. I don't know what you're talking about. I said you're done, the sentry repeated, with no trace of sympathy. You and your teammates are to leave immediately. The genin's teammates stood, faces grim, and shuffled down their respective rows in utter humiliation. Still mortified, the guilty genin stood also, muttering in shame, I'm sorry guys. His teammates said nothing as they left and the door closed behind them with a click. All other cheaters in the room abruptly paused, fearing the same fate. Naruto shuddered at the sight. He had to steel his nerves after the incident. The time that slowly ticked by afterwards was only a blueprint for disaster as numerous other teams were eliminated. Their numbers were shouted aloud and they made the terrible trek to the door, their heads hung in embarrassment. 45 anguishing minutes passed. Time's up. Abiki's voice rang out over the thick silence. Now, I will explain the rules of the final question. Groans of annoyance sounded as tired brains were reawakened. Naruto faced front, eyes wide. This is it. Number 10. Some things you should be aware of before we proceed are the following. If you answer this last question incorrectly, your entire team will fail automatically. Abiki's voice was mechanical. Furthermore, neither you or your teammates may participate in any future Chunin selection exams if you miss this question. Groans of annoyance transformed into gasps of shock. What are you saying? Sakura's shout was distinguishable. Our entire performance so far is judged on a single question. That makes no sense. Naruto stood up, howling in outraged agreement. Yeah. That's totally stupid. Just what kind of question is it anyway? Silence. The two rowdy leaf genin sat down and shut up. You have been given an option, the heartless proctor went on with no change in inflection. If you feel that you are unable to answer the 10th question under these conditions, you may choose to drop out now and be free to take next year's exam. Otherwise, this will be your only chance to pass the first portion of the test. The room was eerily quiet as hands began to appear in the air, and numbers were called as nervous genin and their teammates stood and prepared to leave, believing in the phrase, better safe than sorry. A few minutes passed as more and more genin abandoned their endeavors. Naruto sat, shaking in a fit of rage, unable to believe that an entire test could depend on one question. He glanced back at Gaara, who sat unperturbed in his seat, staring ahead. Haku, who was at the front, also looked peculiarly calm. I just can't accept this. Not even if Haku-kun gives me the answer. If he knows it, this is complete B. A quivering hand rose into the air, and from the back of the room, Gaara narrowed his eyes, not expecting his stubborn friend to succumb to such pressures. Even without looking back, Haku could tell Naruto had raised his hand. And just as quickly as he had lifted it, Naruto s his fist down onto his desk, standing and glowering at the scarred proctor. All eyes were set on him, even those who were about to give up. As the blonde boy glared blue fire at Ibiki, this whole test is complete B and I couldn't care less if I flunk this question or not. Haku sighed to himself, smiling. I don't care if I'm stuck as a genin for the rest of my life. I'm going to be Hokage someday, and that means I can never back down. Naruto declared, wearing a sadistic grin, so whatever this question is, bring it on. He sat back down with a thump and folded his arms. Inside his head, however, his resolve was shaken. Oh crap. I better get this right. Hinata stared at him with pearly, awestruck eyes. Her thoughts were a jumbled mess of inspiration. Naruto-kun is so brave. From the right, the blonde boy was surprised to hear the first peep to come from Sato, who was muffling his laughter. Somewhere in the back, although he couldn't tell from where, Lee was congratulating Naruto's youthful spirit. Ibiki himself was impressed that after the speech no more genin had decided to quit. Well, looks like that kid did it. No one else appears to be backing down. He frowned to himself. There's a lot more left than I had anticipated. This is going to be very interesting. The proctor spoke up a moment later. Very well, we will then move on. He smirked inwardly. Pay close attention. The room was quiet again, with the exception of Sato's stifled chuckles. You all, pass. Somewhere in the back of the room a person had collapsed from their seat. The sound of thudding jaws impacting desks was also predictably audible. Ibiki only sighed as the volume of the room grew in hysterical confusion. Gaara's eyes were set on Naruto as the blonde boy struggled to grasp what had happened. Wait a minute. Sakura still wasn't buying it. What's the 10th question? There isn't one, Ibiki said simply. It was merely a ploy to determine which ninja would stand up to the challenge, no matter how hopeless it appeared. Just what are you trying to say exactly? Naruto inquired. I squinted. In the world of a shinobi there will be missions that seem hopeless, Ibiki explained. Many ninja would abandon the duty if they were given the choice to do so, as seen here. But a ninja must be able to fight against the odds, regardless of how difficult the mission is. He looked directly at Naruto. Anyone left here now has proven they are willing to face such adversity, a characteristic necessary in order to become a chunin. That is why you've passed. Naruto's bafflement melted away in seconds and a huge grin covered his entire face. Ha ha. I knew it all along. There's no way we could fail a test like this. He turned to the shy girl beside him. Isn't that right, Hinata-chan? Ah, right. He was delighted by her squeak of agreement. Other genin added to the cheering, though none as loudly as Lee or Naruto. The rejoicing had barely lasted 5 minutes or so before an explosion of smoke filled the front left corner of the classroom, and a ninja tumbled inside, hurling kunai into the walls in order to secure a drape that obscured Ibiki from sight. The Kunoichi righted herself and glared at the surprised genin. All right, listen up, maggots. We will now move on to the second part of the chunin exam. Haku stared wide-eyed. Anko-sensei. The dark-haired woman looked over to him. Oh, hey Haku. I knew you'd be here. How about the weird ones? They're here too. She grinned. Perfect. You're early again, Anko. Ibiki walked out from behind the drape. We were just finishing up. I can see that, she frowned. Abiki, there are way too many left over. What were you thinking? You better not be getting soft with your tests. I can assure you, I'm not. We have a large number of strong candidates this year, it seems. He answered, looking very pleased. Haku blinked, never guessing that Anko would be involved in the upkeep of the Chunin exam. Anko nodded and then returned her attention back to the genin. Listen, good maggots. I'm Mitarashi Anko, your proctor for the second part of the Chunin selection exam. You are all to report to training area 44 within a half hour. Any questions? There was a stunned silence as her response. She didn't bother waiting for any inquiries. Good. I'll see you there. Anko was gone a moment later, leaving Haku to share a long-sided glance with his teammates. Naruto stood after a moment, stretching his arms over his head. Phew. That wasn't so bad. Other genin also began to stand, murmuring to each other. Leave your test papers at your desks. They are to be collected. Abiki gave his final announcement. You better move along. You will not be registered for the second part of the exam if you're late. Naruto had appeared beside Gaara and they waited as Haku left his seat, his head still reeling from the puzzling written test. The blonde boy gave his friend a nudge in the ribs. See? I told you we'd pass no problem. Gaara was not so easily fooled. Haku-kun put a mirror on your desk too, didn't he? Yeah, he did. Let's go, was Gaara's reply once a fatigued-looking Haku had joined them, and they proceeded to join the exiting crowd, already pondering what the next portion of the exam held in store. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.